Howdy, welcome to the MasterCast. I'm your host, Ben Wiggins, and it is a beautiful day in Aggieland. We welcome Munoz to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
It is our pleasure. Talk a little bit about your role at Texas A&M. I'm fascinated to hear more about this.
So I've been here for a year, and I was hired to do strategy and analytics. As I joined, to be completely honest, there's been a shift from analytics to insights. Oh. And that's very purposeful because when you think about analytics, in today's environment, people have access to analytics.
Yeah.
So I want for everybody in the university to be able to do their own analytics. Insights is something a little bit different. So my role is to come in and help with strategy and insights. So be able to help people inform their own campaigns, their own decisions. And if we're able to do that, then I've done my role well. So my job at the university is to be in charge of advertising, a lot of the recruiting, the marketing, the campaign, the assessment, the evaluation, and all of those things fall under strategy and analytics for now, but strategy and insights.
Okay. So can you give us an example? Let's say, so that I'll just paint an analytics version from the way I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, which I probably will be. But so let's say 2,000 people watched the MasterCast. Yeah. That's an analytic measure.
Yes.
And then what would the insights be that you would gain from that, or that you would look for?
It's a great question. So we ask the why.
Okay.
Right. And I think I have a really good friend of mine. He's a principal data scientist, and he's now in Chicago. He would say, I can tell you the number. I can tell you how many people are watching a show, but I cannot tell you why.
Yeah.
That's the insight. So the fact that you know that 2,000 people are watching or streaming or listening doesn't tell you much. It just gives you a number, right? It gives you the audience.
Right.
What we need to understand is understanding, why are they watching? Why are they streaming? What's moving them? Why are they coming back? Those are the insights. Right. So my goal is to be the storytelling behind those 2,000 people.
Story.
That's the key. Yeah. I mean, truly, that's the key.
And where does that journey begin for you? Maybe it's a different place every time, but what's the first question that you like to ask in terms of why? You know, what led us here? I mean, it seems like that's big that is blue
a big
ocean.
Question.
So where do you begin?
That's a good question. It depends. And I really dislike when we say, well, it depends on what you're asking, but it really depends, because if let's continue on this stream of, a couple of thousand people are listening to the podcast. Okay. So then we go into, why are they listening? And that why could be a survey, could be qualitative analyses, could be a social understanding. Okay. We go into what information do we have? Based on the information that we have, we're then able to say, okay, what variables can we control? What variables are we not aware? And then we can do the assessment, right? We can do into secondary data or primary data. Depending on that, you do a primary research or secondary analysis, because in today's environment, and I'll be quiet after, you can always jump in because I will go long.
No, this is good.
But you can always go in, and we have a lot more data and information than we realize. It's the storytelling and the extrapolating of insights that gets a little hard. So going back to your question, what is the first question that you ask? My first question is, what information do we have available?
Sure. From
there, then we can say, okay, how do we could do a decision tree. We have this, no, yes, and then you can decide how to proceed.
Okay. So my next question then is, when you look at the landscape and you say, what information do we have available? Then the next question you ask is, what is the next information we want to get?
Yes.
And what is that thing most commonly? Like, what is the thing that is not low-hanging fruit, but is the thing that you can then get that is the best combination of easily available and really moves the needle? Where does that usually go?
It depends on what you're trying to get. It depends on your goal. Again, sticking to your example, if you're trying to understand who is watching, right, or who's streaming, then perhaps it's just a segmentation. So you may stop at demographics. But if you're really trying to understand and saying, you know what, I noticed that every other Monday or every other Sunday or Tuesday or whatever, certain amount of people are watching, right? And there's a spike. Then you could potentially go in and start to get into the psychographics. Because then based on psychographics, you can say, I don't know, let's say we want to work with advertisers, or we want to position this with a new program or a new, type of student. We can then begin to tailor that. So depending on what you're trying to get, right? Depending on that goal, it's where you stop. Sometimes it's just a simple question. It's like, you know what? I just want to know demographics. Okay, well, that's a pretty simple next step. You get to get the demographics and you stop. But sometimes you're like, no, I really, really want to know who is listening and when and why. And I know that our entrepreneurship program needs a little bit of a bump because of X. Great. Let's look at the psychographics. And so that's when it gets very fun, right? But you have to have an end result.
Yeah.
You do.
What has been your best eureka moment from the last year?
Okay, I have one. I like football. I like football a lot.
You're a good company.
I didn't grow up watching football. I am from Mexico, if you cannot tell by my accent, but I am from Mexico. And so I grew up watching soccer or football. Okay,
yes.
So football is a little different than football.
El Tri.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I'm a huge fan of. So I am an American citizen, and I cheer for the U.S. on every sport except soccer.
Yeah.
Women's soccer, yes, 100%. Men's soccer, no. It's El Tri all the way. I am a huge fan. Anyway, so a really brief example of what you said, like a big eureka moment, is how the media sphere has changed over the last 10 years. So when A&M moved to the SEC, there was a very big move, right? And then it happened to coincide with Johnny Manziel, and there was a big assessment of when he won the Heisman Trophy, and so there was an assessment as to what was the media valuation, right, for winning the Heisman Trophy, moving to the SEC. A&M beating Alabama. So there was a combination of factors.
Yeah.
The fact, it was in the, tens of millions of dollars. Okay. Last year, we beat Alabama.
Yes.
And so we had not Johnny Manziel, right? But there was a big push as to, well, what is that worth in today's media? So then the question came to me and they said, Isaac, can you help us answer this question?
Oh.
Absolutely. I was like, let's do a media valuation. The key to a media valuation is you need to understand what's the cost of that impression the day that you bought it, okay? Because if you go, and the marketing professors can jump in on this as well, but the media valuation changes. And it's a term that the industry recognizes, but people tend to struggle with putting a value because it changes on a day-to-day basis. Think of a marketplace. That's kind of how it varies, right? It fluctuates. Anyway, I'll make the story shorter, already gone a little bit longer. But so then they asked me, can we do the valuation? So the evaluation that was done in 2012 was over a 3-month period, okay?
Yeah.
And this time around, I did the valuation for 3 days, right? So it was taking into consideration social media mentions, session mentions, TV mentions, the actual spot that it ran, the TV impressions, and the amount of money, right? Assuming inflation has changed only so much, was only like $5 or $6 million less than it was in 2012. The big insight is that we have that media valuation that this university gets through athletics, right? That we can then come up with something that could be beneficial for the university. And I think that's something that I heard Ross talk about, even though athletics are at the center of the university just because they get a lot of media. It's only the start, right? So that, I'll say, I think it was about $20-something million valuation was incredible. So to me, it was just a huge insight of the power of being at the SEC, the power of a win, and then being able to get all of those nuggets through the media and how it has changed thanks to social media as it did in 2012. Anyway, so that was a huge insight to me.
That's fantastic. What brought you back to Texas A&M? Or brought you to Texas A&M, I should say. You did your PhD somewhere else.
Yes, I did.
And what got you here?
That's a great question. Well, so I married a family of Aggies. I said that with pride, believe it or not. And my brother is finishing his master's degree here. So little by little, we're adopting into the A&M culture.
Yeah.
That said, I got my undergraduate at Texas Tech. I got my master's degree at A&M Commerce. But before I actually got my master's at A&M Commerce, I actually was about to move here to College Station to get my MS in marketing. But I didn't because my brother was finishing his degree at UNT, University of North Texas. Yeah. So he moved in with me in Dallas. And so then I was like, you know what, I'll postpone. And I got the degree that I wanted in Dallas. Eventually, I finished the PhD at that other university. Yes, that's true. And I've always been interested in higher ed. I love higher education. Outside of, obviously, you can see it in my own education. I just love higher education. I feel like we have a mission to change how people can view the world. You have a big influence. We have a big influence, and we're shaping culture changers. Anyway, so to your question, why A&M and what brought me here? I was in conversations with the previous chief marketing officer, and she said, we have an opportunity for, the head of strategy and analytics. Would you be interested? And as I said, I married a family of Aggies. And I mean, I have to admit it, Aggies are a little different in a great way. They are, they really do value, or they really do have the 6 values, right? And I mean, you can talk to people and they're like selfless service, and like they get into the love of the university and the love of people. And being here, coming to, 2 different games, football games, I was able to see the culture and I just loved it. And so little by little, I was attracted. I talked to the chief marketing officer. She offered the job, and I was like, that's a good in.
This is it.
Let's go.
Yeah, fantastic.
Let's go.
What do you think prepared you for this opportunity best? And you can pick anything along your journey from, growing up, all the way through to, when you took the job.
What prepared me best for this job? I think it's just a combination of things. Because, so my first job was at a McDonald's. And I loved that job. I loved the job, not because I could eat for free, which I could, but I just loved it, or that the fries were pretty incredible, which they were.
They are.
They still are. So I was a manager at a very early age. At 17, I was managing a couple of stores.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I loved just the problem solving that came on a day-to-day basis, right? Because you had to deal with people didn't show up to work. People came late. People, had to leave because they had to go to school. And as a 17-year-old, and sometimes managing people, I guess now my age, right, 21, you get to see a little bit of just quick response. How are you able to solve? So that helped me a lot about managing in a stressful environment. That's one. The second job that I think has really helped me, and it's going to be a little bit of an odd job perhaps, but when I was in college at Tech, I used to sell like tennis shoes at a flea market. Okay. And I honestly enjoyed it a lot. That's why I never went to college football games on Saturday mornings, because I was either working at McDonald's and managing one of the stores, or I was at the flea market selling. And what I love about the flea market is that you get to see a different spectrum of, shoppers. Some people who were, well off, some people who were just actually buying stuff for the day, some people that were just kind of shopping around to see what they could fix. And I would try different signs. I would try different, it would be shoes, and I would say, I don't know, 2 for $20, or, I could come up with different, psychology, and that would be pretty much what I would be testing. And that was a lot of fun because you could see people reacting to the signs. And to me, that was wonderful. I was like, that was awesome. At McDonald's, I also got to see the clients and the clientele that would be coming in and visiting.
Yeah.
And I would know their names, and I would know what they would order, and I would know if they would be in a bad mood, good mood. And so little by little, I started realizing that I really enjoy consumer behavior. I love observing people. I love to see, how they could potentially be altered into a different state by a sign or a light or a price. And so what I do today, even though it's consumer behavior in a different way, I get to do that for the different parts of the university, right? The different schools come for help, or the university itself comes for assistance on, do we have a segment? Do we have a market? What do they think? What do they believe? What do they behave? Like, how do they behave? And that's exciting to me. So all those jobs have helped me prepare for that. Outside of and I say those because those were before I graduated. Like once I graduated, I worked at advertising agencies. I worked at a client side. I worked at Southwest Airlines. I worked at AT&T. And in those jobs, you have a bigger budget and you have more processes. At a McDonald's, yes, you have a lot of processes and operations, but it's a lot of you have to decide in the moment. Yes, it's exactly right. Figure it out. You know, if you're running, if you're running short or low on fries, you know, like how do you have to move fast, right? It's that kind of a thing. It's a quick answer.
Okay, so let's move into that more specific experience where it was a little bit maybe less entrepreneurial, but the insights were you started to get super specific about what you were looking for. What, you know, DirecTV, Bromley, let's walk me through a little bit of that. What was the journey for you in terms of the most important things that you were learning from those experiences?
So at my first job was at Morocco in Dallas, which at the time they were owned by Leo Burnett. Interestingly enough, they were the advertising agency for the franchisees of certain McDonald's. Okay, because there's the McDonald's Corporation that does the global marketing, if you will. And then you have the franchisees that partner with a smaller agency, usually to target a more regional audience. Okay, so I was part of Morocco, and when I worked with Morocco, it was quite fun because they had to do a very good job with promotional data.
Okay.
And so what that means is every time there would be, I don't know, Big Mac's 2 for 2 or whatever, right? A certain coupon. They would do out of homes. They would do regional buys, and then they would be able to evaluate kind of how many people went to the store during the run of the campaign. So we pulled that data, and I was able to see that come to life. That was fun. That was a very quick turnaround on campaign.
Which campaigns worked best?
You know what? We were trying to be very creative with out of home because it was Dallas. So Dallas is a big market and it's high traffic.
Sure.
So out of home was one of those that there was big investment, and it was always, how can we be creative with an out of home? And it has to be in 8 words or less. It had to be then with 8 words or less. If you have more than 8 words, you have a bad ad, right? Or you have a bad out of home, because you don't have that. You're not going to be stuck in traffic for that long that you can read more than 8 words. So out of home was a big target for us. Radio was a big target. Now, you have to be, radio is not what it is today, right? This was 2004. Well, right? So I mean, it's a different world. A very different world than it is today, right? Now it's a lot more focused on social media and the immediacy that comes through a click-through, you know, or click-through rate and, you know, open rate. Like that has shifted versus what it was then. That was that. Then I moved to San Antonio and I worked at Bromley, and my brands were, honestly, I had the pleasure, the privilege of working with very cool brands. So I had, you know, Coors Light, Coors Banquet, you know, General Mills, and it was just quite fun. Their approach to advertising and marketing was completely different. Everything was very operations driven. You have a process for everything. You know, you have the RASI, you know, like responsible, blah, blah. Like everything was incredibly organized. The inside was machine driven, if you will. And that's not a bad thing. It may sound like it's a criticism. It's not. It's even the way you arrive to an insight, there's a process to that. Right? Rather than let's talk to the customer, let's see how it goes. Like, no, you have to drive a campaign. That's the insight, and then the insight is going to be everything for the campaign for the next year. So it taught me that there's a lot of process into customer insights. I was also working with the Hispanic market, and that was quite a fun because, again, this was 2007. So 2007, it's not what it is today, where Hispanic is the, you know, majority minority. It wasn't then. We were beginning to see a shift from the 1970s, 80s, 2000s in the census and the increase in Hispanic population in the United States. But it wasn't as it is today. Today, it's incredibly important for brands to go after this market, right? And it's built into the marketing plan. Back then, we had to do a lot of business pitches on importance of this market and why we had to go after. And so, if anything, what that job taught me was the importance of having a well-structured case study as to where you want to take the brand. So it taught me that it's a lot of people do not understand or are not aware of the potential of a market. And you have to explain to them. It's your job to explain to them why it's important to them. A lot of times, we assume that because the other person or the brand or the senior leader does not know, well, they're just ignorant. They don't want to learn. No. It's on us because they have plenty of other things going around. So he taught me how to write a case study and be able to position it well for the other side to see.
What does that look like? You're talking about, so you write a case study. What is the difference between that and what you had been doing, with out of homes in the Dallas market? How was this process of convincing leadership to take action in this particular way? So it was just a more structured, so you say case study, does that become like a pitch? Like, are you writing it in a more academic way? Like, why do you call it a case study?
A case study, in this case, is more of a justification on the importance of the investment versus when you are a McDonald's, right? You have to advertise because we know that that's what works with the majority of the market.
Okay.
So on one side, it's a pillar of investment, and on the other one is a justification for the importance of the investment.
Okay.
And so it's a case study in the sense that you have to write it's not necessarily more academic, although it can be more academic. Think of it more as a business pitch, and it really is. A lot of it was trying to explain the new business as to why this matters. And here's the thing, and I will give credit to brands. They were very open to that. Coors Light, which I just read, I was actually excited about this. They are going to be advertising in the Super Bowl. That didn't happen when we were advertising for Coors Light, right? And back then, it was all about Rocky Mountain Cold Refreshment. And how does it all ladder up to Rocky Mountain Cold Refreshment? And we had what we called Universidad Coors, or University Coors. And it was training the sales people to think and to see consumer behavior at the local level, and that was quite fun. But that took their CMO to be able to say the Hispanic market is important. We need to invest. We need to bring this agency and not just do our advertising, but help inform our sales people. That was quite fun, right? And so that was I was an account planner, which then became a strategic planner. In today's environment, it could pretty much be a brand planner. It depends on who you ask. But that was my job. My job went from explaining the importance of the consumer, but now bringing in together the brand, the marketplace, and the consumer, and explaining it to the brand. And brands were very excited about that. They were like, okay, now we're onto something. And Coors Light, to finish that case study, to finish that example, we were able to become, we became, I think, one of the top selling brands in beer. And you have to understand that back then, Coors Light was always seen as the watered down beer. I'm not a beer drinker, sorry. I drank it when I went to Colorado, to actually do the tour.
Yeah.
But it was always seen as, oh, it's not a good beer. It's a watered down beer, blah, blah, blah. And it was Bud Light. And like, that was like, or Miller Lite. Like those were like the beers that people would choose. Now you have like 30 beers. Like that's an insane amount of, that's a big market.
But those are the big three now.
And now, exactly. And now Coors Light is usually like 1 or number 2 or number 3. That's huge. I'm not saying that that's because of the job that we did, but we were very strategic about how we would push that.
Yeah.
I'll finish your question really quick because I know that you asked this, and I will jump in if I need to stop. I went into Southwest Airlines, and at Southwest Airlines, it was a very different environment because
this is exactly where I wanted to go.
Okay,
next.
perfect.
You're ahead of me.
We're trained well. So at Southwest Airlines, we talked about research, and when I was hired, I was hired into a team of customer insights, and in customer insights, we were very much into how can we help with the research? How can we help with research? And it was very product research oriented. Little by little, we began to shift the mindset of customer insights is about bringing that insight that doesn't just come from research, right? To what we started the podcast. You asked, and one of your first questions was like, how do you know? Well, I can give you the numbers, right? And with the numbers, you can make a decision.
Right.
Or I can give you the insight and the story so you can make a little bit more of an informed decision, right? You get to then be the voice of the customer rather than just seeing the number. So at Southwest Airlines, we moved more into how can we help the company understand the consumer and the customer in different ways. So that was through segmentation, that was through fly-alongs, that was through, UX research, that was through, fair product research. Mm-hmm. That was through like very innovative ways of looking at customer research that at the end of the day is to unearth the insight. Yeah. It was not to give a number.
Okay. So now, looking back at yourself 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, but like recent, what is the single thing you have learned about human behavior, consumer behavior, that surprises you the most, that you would not have thought to be true 5 or 10 years ago?
Doesn't matter how much research you do, we are incredibly unpredictable. We as people say we want something and we don't really know.
Right.
And I think that's the interesting line between research or self-disclosed research and observational research.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people tend to go into behavioral research, because like, well, that's what you did and that's not what you claimed.
Right.
There's a fine line between the two. Mm-hmm. And so I think you need both. To your question, I think that we are very unpredictable. What we state tends to be sometimes overstated because that's who we want to believe we want to be.
Yeah.
And just because you did something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do it again. So I think there's a line between the two.
Okay.
The behavior doesn't mean that you're going to be repeated the same thing over and over. Just because you stated something doesn't mean that it's not necessarily true. And how do we, as insight-driven people or storytellers, how can we work in that in between? Yeah. And I think that's the cool part of the job.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what it is.
What you just said, I think, is the best possible case for minimum viable products and,
yes.
In entrepreneurship, because as Rob Fitzpatrick would tell us, everyone with the best of intentions will lie to you about whether your business idea works or not.
Absolutely.
And
let me jump in on that really quick,
please.
Because so there are two things. I think Jeff Bezos is the one that always talks about the customer will not tell you what they want, right? So customer research to some extent a necessary evil, but it's not 100% predictable. If you are able to guide a customer, a person into thinking what the future can look like, you get very rich data. Mm-hmm. We tend to say research does not work because we are very linear in our thinking. We're not creative in our research.
Okay.
And so when people say research is not creative, I'm like, no, then you're doing research the wrong way, right? You're asking a 5-point, I Likert scale, or you're like, no, there's more ways to doing research than asking specifically.
Go ahead.
And then the minimum viable product. When I was working at AT&T, we had the platform, DirecTV Go, and we could have stayed and not launched the product because it wasn't ready. Mm-hmm. And it was ready in many ways, but it was not ready in so many more.
Yeah.
Right? But sometimes you just have to put it in the market.
Go be bad.
Yes.
Go be bad.
Now,
right now.
But it's an opportunity cost, right? What are you willing to invest? How are you willing to deal with the repercussions of putting it in the market? You cannot wait until it's going to be really, really ready, because then the opportunity may pass you by.
Yeah.
Right? But you also don't want to put a bad product in the market.
Yeah.
And so you as an entrepreneur, and I lived it. So we had to, once it was in the market, we had to deal with customer care. How is this going to happen? We don't have this product. This is not launching. This is bad reviews. These are bad reviews, blah, blah, blah. It was awesome, but it required all hands on.
So how do you then, what was the moment, and you might not have been the one making the decision, but as you observed the whole thing unfold, AT&T made this decision to put the product in the marketplace maybe a little bit before it was ready, which I think is usually a wise choice. It's better not to lose the time. It's better to start getting the feedback. Like, that's the best data that you have. When did they say, okay, now? What motivated that decision?
I wasn't there for that. So I joined the second year.
Mm-hmm.
So when I joined, we had a couple thousand paying customers. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
A couple thousand. That's it. We were supposed to be in the tens of thousands, ideally hundreds of thousands of customers. Okay. So the product had already launched. I was there. So my job was, Isaac, you're going to get people, don't let them go, right? Because I was the head of engagement for all of Latin America.
Yeah.
So from Mexico all the way to Brazil. Like, okay, how do I keep them in the market? How do I keep them in the platform?
Right.
And so at that point, we had a lot of issues. Like our CMS was not at par where we needed to be. Curation was done manually. Artificial intelligence recommendation was not where it needed to be. Certain content was not loading accordingly. Metadata was not where it needed to be. So we had a lot of issues. Our CRM and our customer relationship management, we had the journey, but we weren't able to really do the programming correct, that we could send push notification and text messages. We didn't have that. It was very elementary. So even though the product was there, if you, as the head of engagement, if somebody would have come, are we ready to launch? Maybe I would have said no, right? But I came to a ship that was already, in the water. Like, well, we cannot go back to dock. Like, no. We literally, we go. And so, how many people do we have here? Okay, do we need a lifeboat? Yes. Okay, so maybe don't stay too far. Like, it was problem solving in the moment.
Yeah.
And I have to say that it took commitment from the team. Yeah. It took commitment from my boss, and it took commitment from AT&T to make sure that this was going to work. A lot of startups don't have that. Needless to say, the product was sold in 2020. It was sold quite well, to an Argentine venture capitalist group, and we had like hundreds of thousands of customers, and the CMS was working well, but it took a lot of work. Now, this is one of those things that worked for this startup, right? We also had a very nice backing that was AT&T. Would this have been for a different company? I don't know. I don't know if it would have worked.
Yeah.
But I was thankfully in a place that the team was committed to making it work. And we had good content because we had a partnership with, at that point it was Warner Media. Warner Media was part of AT&T. So with that, we had, Game of Thrones and a lot of really big shows that we could obviously leverage for Latin America.
Game of Thrones, what's that?
I don't know. I've heard of it. I'm going to be honest. It's like, it's okay.
So, all right. So now bring us to current. What's next? What's now? What's next?
So thinking about that question, it's,
what is now?
What is now? I think that's a very philosophical, ontologically speaking. If you think about what's next, you asked, what did you learn from Bromley? What did you learn at McDonald's? What did you learn from the previous roles or at Southwest or at AT&T? Is that a lot of people don't really understand what you do. And this is the place where I am right now. So maybe don't understand my accent. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe that's what I need to practice a little bit more. I think people think of marketing and what comes to mind is advertising or promotions.
Yeah.
Interestingly, even though we have had a lot of professors here at Mays and at other schools that have made a really good job to try to say marketing is more than the 4 P's and like 5 C's, and like you have into this interesting acronyms, right?
It's the 3 Q's and the 7 D's.
That's exactly right. Yes. Like now we go through the whole alphabet. But if you think about it, and so now my job is to explain the importance of strategy in marketing, the measurement and insight, and doing it in a higher ed institution. That to me is actually fun. It's quite fun because I'm in a place where not a lot of people do what I do in higher ed. And this is where I have to give it to senior leadership, and I have to give it to our chief marketing officer and the previous chief marketing officer. They saw a need for a person to come in and help guiding a little bit more of a campaign. Is it feasible? Do we have the KPIs? Do we have the OKRs? Is it worth the investment, and what is it going to do for the brand? These are big questions that when you think about it from a private sector side, it's commonplace, right? I don't want to say banal, but it's commonplace. People understand that that's a must.
Yeah.
But this is not what it is in higher ed. So we are about maybe 10 years behind private sector, right? At least in my area. And and to me, rather than be discouraged, that's exciting because that's an opportunity to explain to people why I'm here, why we're doing this, why there's a process, why there's a journey, why we need to evaluate, why it values measurement, why your brand matters, why your brand is worth, the importance of brand and branding. that's exciting to me. So that's what's next to me. To me, it's explaining my job and why it's important.
Good bull.
Good bull. Well, I'll start with my senior leadership, like my colleagues in marketing. I think we've been through a lot of changes. And so, like I said, I came in when the new presidency started. And so there's been a lot of changes. And I think with that, a lot of people get nervous about that. And that change is uncomfortable for people. Doesn't matter how much you like change, people get uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. You can think about it at home. You can think about it like even when you're driving, to your house or to work. If there's a street closure, you're like, oh my gosh, like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go drive around, whatever. People don't like change. All that to say. So our senior leadership, all of the marketing senior leadership has done a really good job. So I think that they've done a superb job with adjusting to the change. I would say that for sure. And I mean, you mentioned this guy, Blake. I think he's done a really good job as well. I think there's a lot of what he does, and I see him as the ultimate connector. And I think that's an incredibly positive thing, because it takes a lot to know people and how they can connect for the betterment of the people and then the entity as a whole. And I think that's what he does. He does that amazing job for Mace and representing the university. And then probably I'll go with a third one. CJ Woods, Dr. Woods has done a really good job trying to, under admissions and recruiting, there's a lot going on there. And as I get to work more with him and his team, and I get to help him set the strategy and the goals and measurement, there's a lot that goes in there. And we take for granted, because this is a large university, a very well-known university. And so people are excited to be here. But how do you get to recruit and admit students that are going to be good for the brand and it's going to be good for them as well? And that takes a lot. And so I think what the pressure that they're going through is also it's also a lot, but he's done a superb job. And obviously he's managed in different places now. This is his new role, and that's exciting. So
that's great. Good bull to them and good bull to you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate the time and the insights.
I appreciate it.